Project Shivoham, how Rigvedic Indra became European Thor. And this is always fascinating. It's always fascinating seeing the similarities between them. And I don't always believe that there is only one and then everyone kind of bled off from that. I personally believe like a lot of people feared certain things. Like you look at Native Americans, they also have like a worship of thunder, worship of nature, worship of like all that kind of stuff. You go around the world, even like the Hawaiian Islands had their own mythology. Africa has its own mythology, like around the world. And they all have very similar kind of concept, very similar kind of deities. And I've always found that fascinating. Always. Like the fear of the ocean, you end up with like these ocean gods. You have Poseidon, you have like in Norse mythology, Greek mythology, like all of them have different one. And there's like god of war, Ares, and Mars, and like the list goes on and on. Those are just the ones off the top of my head because it was like Roman and Greek was like my forte. I enjoyed those. African I dabbled in. Like Native American, I was just like, oh, this is a cursory glance. Like knowing the god of what is it, Ra, the god of the sun for Egypt. I think it was Ra. Yeah, I'm trying to think the other ones already, but yeah, it's just like there's just always similarities. The stories are always kind of the same. I've always found that fascinating. I've always found that fascinating, and I guess this is just kind of like the similarities. That's how I'm viewing it. The similarities between them, not how it became it, but the similarities between them.
A monstrous sea serpent rises from the waters. Rivers stop flowing. Access to water is cut off. People begin to choke. Then a storm god appears. In the Rigveda, Indra rides forward on a white elephant with the Vajra in his hand and strikes down the great serpent Vritra, releasing the trapped waters back to the world. But then something strange happens. The same legend appears again. In the ancient Hittite world, another divine warrior battles the serpent Illuanka. In Greece, Zeus fights a monstrous snake called Typhoon. In the frozen north of Europe, Thor battles the serpent Jormungandr. Different lands, different languages, different gods, yet the same battle repeats itself again and again across Eurasia for thousands of years. A monstrous sea snake cuts off access to water, a divine warrior appears, kills the snake, and releases the water back to the people. This is the archetype. Why does this same legendary pattern stretch from Rigveda all the way to Scandinavia, Greece, and West Asia? Why is Thursday still named after Thor, the thunder god of the Nordics? Why does India's highest wartime honor still carry the symbolism of Indra? And why does the story of Krishna dancing on Kaliya resemble one of the oldest narratives preserved in Rigveda of Indra killing Vritra? Why were civilizations separated by thousands of kilometers telling the same story again and again over thousands of years? From the hymns of the Rigveda to the mountains of the Greece to the frozen forests of northern Europe, the same pattern repeats itself. A monstrous serpent cuts off access to the water, people suffer, a divine warrior fights the serpent and releases the water back again. How did this ancient storm god legend survive across the Eurasian world over thousands of years? Let us dive in. This entire narrative of Indra killing the great sea serpent Vritra comes from one of the oldest layers of the Rigveda itself, and the imagery described is violent, cosmic, and dramatic. The Rigveda says, with his vast destroying thunderbolt, Indra struck the darkling, mutilated Vritra. As trunks of tree fall beneath the axe, so lies Akhi prostrate upon the earth. Indra kills Vritra with the Vajra. At first glance, this sounds like a simple legend. The divine warrior riding a white elephant striking down a monstrous serpent. But the deeper we go into Rigveda, the more symbolic is this entire narrative. That's what we understand. Because the Rigveda is not merely a collection of stories. It is a ritual poetry, deeply symbolic, deeply layered, and many times what appears on the surface as a battle between gods and monsters may actually represent something much older, natural, and civilizational. Take for example the word Prithvi itself. Why do we call the earth as Prithvi? In Harivamsha, the 19th book of Mahabharata, the traditional explanation is very clear. Under the reign of King Prithu, agriculture and organized cultivation was expanded massively. The land became fertile and prosperous, and over time, the memory of that ruler became etched so deeply into the civilizational consciousness that the earth itself became to be remembered as Prithvi in the name of King Prithu. Even when the original story fades away, the memory survives inside the language itself, and perhaps the same thing happened with the legend of Indra and Vritra as well. If we carefully read the hymns of Rigveda, one thing becomes very clear. Vritra is not merely described as a serpent. He is being that blocks the waters. Rivers stop flowing because of Vritra. Water becomes inaccessible. Life itself begins to suffer because of Vritra. Then Indra arrives as a storm god, strikes with thunder, and suddenly the waters are released back into the world. Understand this pattern carefully. As serpent cuts off access to water, a divine warrior destroys the serpent. The water flows back again. Suddenly this begins to sound less like a literal reptilian monster and more like a symbolic representation of the dry riverbed. A dried and twisted riverbed winding across the land like a giant serpent. And then the arrival of rain, the thunder and the storms break that drought and revives the rivers once again. And in that sense, Vritra may not simply be a giant snake. Vritra may be a representation of an obstruction itself, the drought itself, the holding back of life-giving waters. And Indra, the wielder of thunder, becomes the force that restores back into the world the life and the livelihood of the civilization, which is water. But then the story becomes even stranger because this exact legendary structure does not remain confined to the Rigveda alone. If you like the work that we're doing with Project Shivoham, then do check out my new channel Project Govinda, where the content will be streamed in Telugu. Link to that is in the pinned comment. The same narrative appears again and again across the ancient Eurasian world over thousands of years. In the Norse tradition of the Northern Europe, Thor battles the great sea serpent called Jormungandr. In Greek tradition, Zeus strikes down the monstrous typhoon with thunderbolts. In the Hittite world of ancient Anatolia and Syria, the storm god Tarhunt battles the sea serpent Ilyanka. In Persian traditions, the dragon like Azidahaka appears as another destructive serpent figure opposed by the heroic forces. Different civilizations, different languages, different gods, yet the same legendary structure keeps repeating itself again and again. Now, we may not be able to go through every single ancient tradition one by one because this legendary world stretches almost across the whole of Eurasia. But let us take one fascinating example that is still alive as we speak, as on today. The Slavic world of the pre-Christian Europe. Before Christianity violently spread across Europe, the continent was broadly dominated by several ancient ethno-linguistic groups, the Celts, the Germans, the Slavs, and the Finnic people. And among them, the Slavic world is especially fascinating because today we still have the traces of extremely ancient linguistic and legendary memories surviving there. The Slavic peoples broadly include the ancestors of modern Russians, Ukrainians, Belarusians, Poles, Slovaks, Czechs, Serbs, Croats, and many others. Different nations today, but once part of much broader cultural and
It's funny, they show the tree and immediately I get like the tree of Yggdrasil, the tree of the world, the tree of life, there's so many comparisons to it. Like, that's what's funny is like you keep going back to mythology. It's just, if you think about it, the tree could literally symbolize where people started, and as they spread out, they moved over the world. They moved around, and that makes sense. If let's say people had a story, most stories weren't written in the beginning. They weren't written in the beginning. It was told at a fireside. That's how stories were told. So you have generations of father to son, mother to daughter, constantly telling the stories of what was going on. Oh, motivational stories, like you know, like how things like the Brothers Grimm books, that they weren't the original stories. They weren't the ones to create the stories, but those things were just constantly told to their kids as why you don't go outside at night, why you don't do this, why you should be afraid of strangers, you know, that kind of stuff, but told in like a parable mindset. It's what you had to do. And then eventually it gets written down. And then as soon as it's written down, that's the concrete version of it, the only version of it. Just like how they probably all had somewhat of the same story, but it's like, you know what, this is a good moral for people to know, that it's taken to another location and then they have literally the exact same story, but they equate it with their own traditions, their own way of life, because they've adapted to that way of life. That now it is adapted to their language, it is adapted to their stories, it is adapted to their new beliefs, their new understanding of the world. That it's now that's just so fascinating how it happens, how it just everyone branches off, and like there's so many similarities between every religion, between every single mythology, between almost everything in the world. And there's a reason why no matter what, people go back to like the same old kind of archetypes, the comedies, the horrors, the romance, the hero's journey and all that kind of stuff. It always goes back to like some similar archetypes, because in the end, us human beings are very simple and enjoy the same kind of things. We do. We normally enjoy the same kind of things. Maybe some differing feelings on certain aspects. But other than that, we all enjoy the same kind of thing. So a story around a fireside being told by a good storyteller, and each storyteller would embellish it in their own special way until finally it's written down, and then you have the concrete version that everyone reads. I mean, that's the reason why people thought that the city of Troy was fictional, because it was in the Iliad. A story that had been passed down for generations that finally was written. The compendium of Homer, the Iliad and the Odyssey, which was stories being told, passed down, all put down in a fictional narrative involving gods, the betrayal of nations, a cheating spouse, all that kind of stuff, intrigue, all written down by a storyteller. And then you have people in the modern day not believing it because it's just like, oh, this definitely can't be true. And it takes not an architect. I think it was an architect. It takes an architect, not a historian, to find it. Because he was like, this is way too specific. But it's so fascinating. It's so fascinating.
Linguistic world, and they still are. And this is where things become genuinely interesting, because when we compare Sanskritam with Slavic languages, the similarities are very surprising. Fire in Sanskritam is Agni, and in Russian it becomes Ogon. Water in Sanskritam means Udaka. In Slavic languages it is Voda. That's where your vodka comes from. The word Slava, still heard today in phrases like Slava Ukraine, means glory to Ukraine. And in Sanskritam, Shravaha means glory, fame, or renowned. Even the word Bog in Slavic means divine or godly, carries striking similarities to Bhaga in Sanskritam, which is also reflecting godliness or divineness. That's the reason we say Bhagavan. These are not random modern borrowings. These are echoes of very old linguistic world that once connected civilizations stretching from Indian subcontinent all the way into Europe. Hence, Indo-European languages. But the language was not the only thing they shared. Legends traveled with it, gods traveled with it, symbols traveled with it.
Like
in pre-Christian Slavic world, there existed a rich narrative of a pantheon deeply tied to war, thunder, wisdom, rivers, natures, and the sky itself. One of the most important among them was Svetovid, a powerful Slavic god associated with war, wisdom, and divination. Often depicted with multiple heads, Svetovid represents all-seeing knowledge and cosmic awareness. Even the name itself is very fascinating. Vid means in ancient Indo-European root. It connects to knowing or vidya, just like how we say in Sanskritam today. And Shvet in Slavic languages means white. So Svetovid means the one who is white and giving knowledge. And even today, fragments of this forgotten world survive. Stone pillars, ancient steles, wooden idols record from Slavic regions. They show parts of the ancient worship of Svetovid. Then comes another striking figure, Triglav, literally the three-headed one.
Yeah, call me Svetovid. White and giving knowledge. White and giving knowledge. Retardic knowledge. I can't even speak anymore. Retarded knowledge. And that's probably I should retardic. That's probably what I should do. Yeah. Retarded knowledge, but still knowledge. And I'm white.
God represented with three heads, symbolizing dominion across multiple realms. And what is fascinating is that
and that's because that's what, like in the Hero of a Thousand Faces, that's how you end up with like the Trinity of like God. You have God the Father, God the Son, God the Holy Spirit. It's the 3-in-1, the Trinity. And there's so many references to that throughout and like in Hinduism, it's the creator, the destroyer, the preserver. Is that it? The creator, the destroyer, the preserver. Those are like I'm not going to use their names because I don't remember them, but it's like that's what they represent, I believe. Creator, destroyer. It's like it's so fascinating how so many cultures, so many mythologies, so many religions all seem to have that same kind of similarity. That same kind of similarity with a trinity at the forefront of it all. It's so fascinating.
Even today, Slovenia's most famous mountain, Mount Triglav, still carries the name of this ancient deity, and also on their flag as well. But perhaps the most fascinating deity in our current discussion is Perun. Sounds a bit like Varun.
I'm white
but
and
it's
knowledgeable.
Exactly not
white
that,
and knowledgeable.
But almost similar. Perun, the great Slavic god of thunder, storms, wars, mountains, oaks, trees, and the sky. So kind of a mix of both Indra and Varuna of the Rig Veda. And this Perun is a thunder god, a sky warrior wielding
Stop it.
lightning. The
Don't
same
encourage my
legendary
wife.
structure that we saw earlier in Indra, Zeus and Thor begins to appear in the Slavic world as well. And despite centuries of Christianization, fragments of these older traditions never completely disappeared. In recent decades, especially many
They never
people
do.
across Eastern Europe have
I mean, heck, you can go to Mexico where they had a bunch of classic beliefs like Dia de los Muertos has never disappeared. Even though it's a heavily Christian nation now, heavily Catholic nation now, they still have that. Just like there's that small little town in the middle of nowhere that has Diet Coke, Coca-Cola as like a religious tool, as a form of religion. No matter what, it's funny how I did the same exact thing kind of in react to that Sandman video. No matter what, people always adapt their way of life to their beliefs, or their beliefs adapt to their way of life. Either or. That's how it works. In order to include it into society. Just like Mormonism is Jesus Christ is an American who apparently traveled to the Middle East, but he's an American first and foremost. Bethlehem is somewhere near Utah. It's like, yeah, somewhere in Utah, America. It doesn't make sense to me. It doesn't make sense to me, but that's just it. That's the foundation. That's how it works. And a lot of people like that. But there's a whole joke. There's a play. The only play I've ever seen was the Book of Mormon, and it's a joke on the fact that Mormonism goes to Africa and then changes its entire belief for Africans. But the funny thing is, like, a lot of people don't notice it because a lot of people are willing to laugh at Mormons, but every religion does that. Every religion does that. They always adapt to that location, so that location can easily integrate themselves into it. Just how it works.
begun to rediscover their older Slavic customs once again, and one such celebration is the Kupala Night, an ancient midsummer ritual associated with fire, water, fertility, purification, etc. Young women float flower wreaths across the rivers at night. Bonfires are lit. Ancient rituals are tied to rain, nature, and cosmic cycles. And this festival is also connected to the same thunder god Perun, who is a contemporary of Rigvedic Indra and Varuna. They celebrate water and arrival of the new season. So that's in brief about one of the ethno-linguistic groups of ancient Europe who worship Perun, the sky god of thunder, which is a contemporary of Indra and Varuna. Now if we flip to another such group, the Germanic tribes of the Northern Europe, this is of our interest. The Germanic tribes of Northern Europe, these were the fierce warrior cultures who lived across the cold forests, river systems, and harsh climatic zones of the Northern Europe for centuries. As you can see on the map, much of the Northern Europe was dominated by various Germanic tribes, while to the south stood one of the greatest empires of that time, the Roman Empire. For centuries, these two worlds constantly clashed with
the barbaric tribes. That's what they were. They were just a warring nation. Fight with each other, fight with the Romans as they come in. Every time I hear of it, like the Germanic tribes, the scene from Gladiator pops into my head, where they say no, because the messenger comes back with his head rolling off, and then they come out holding the head, and then they just charge in. And even though they win the battle, they've lost so many people that they have to retreat.
each other. Eventually,
Always pops
waves
into
of
my
Germanic
head.
invasions shook the entire Roman
Yep.
Empire so deeply
They
that
couldn't
they
deal
became
with
one
it.
of the major reasons behind the collapse of the Western Rome itself.
See, that's what's funny is barbarism can never coexist with civilization. And even though the Romans were kind of conquering, they were constantly trying to conquer. They were more civilized than the barbarians. If we're honest, that's just how it is. Just like this day and age, you can't have a barbarian culture integrate into civilized nation. You just can't. They can't coexist. They can't coexist because barbarians will always be barbarians. They can never truly adapt to a civilized society, especially when they believe their barbaric ways are the only barbaric ways. And if you know what I'm talking about, you know what I'm talking about. The UK. Even India, I guess. Because India is dealing with it. Heck, India was like the test subject to see if this could actually work around the world. Send people in, change how things operate.
itself. Tribes such as Goths, Vandals, and Franks repeatedly invaded Roman territories, sacked their cities, and transformed Europe forever. In fact, the modern English word vandalism still preserves the memory of one such Germanic tribe coming from a region called Vandals. Their invasion was so brutal and traumatic that even after thousands of years, the English language still remembers them through a single word, vandalism. But just like the Slavic world has its own thunder gods and legendary structures, the Germanic tribes too preserved their own version of the same storm warrior god archetype. Their great thunder god was called Thor. In fact, in exact pronunciation, it is Thunar, the wielder of lightning and thunder. And even today, archaeologists continue to uncover certain ancient pendants of the hammer of Thor across Scandinavia and Northern Europe. People wore this sacred symbol as a protective amulet and mark of identity. This was not some comic book fantasy. This was a living legendary tradition back then. Once again, the same structure emerges. Thor battles the great world serpent Jormungandr, a colossal sea serpent associated with chaos, destruction, and cosmic catastrophe. But then the story takes another fascinating turn. Because when the Germanic people slowly expanded into the Roman territories, they did not merely conquer their lands, they transformed the culture itself.
Yeah, the Westerners think India is, or Bharatiya, if that's the correct term, was full of barbarians and barbaric ways of living. Well, in the end, the West was never truly able to make it into India. They were always able to make it towards the border region. Like, I know Alexander the Great made it pretty close. He made it towards the area, but then he ended up falling back and never getting in further in. I don't know about the Roman Empire, the Mongolians, yes, the Turks. Did the Turks? I'm not entirely sure, but yeah, there was a lot of people that made it towards India, but they never were truly able to make it far into India. Especially, well, the Turks were not a Western society, but the Westerners never truly completely made it into India. They never actually made it far. They always like cursory touch. It was always those the Muslim nations and Muslim cultures that made it even further into India than the Western at the time made it in.
Rome already had its own sky and thunder god called Jupiter, who again comes from Jauspiter of a Rigvedic deity. But as Germanic influences spread across Europe, Roman names and traditions slowly merged with the Germanic equivalents, and one such example today still survives in English, that is Thursday. The word Thursday literally means Thor's Day. In German and Dutch, the original meaning still survives even more clearly. Dondersday or Donderdag, the ancient day of thunder. Think about how extraordinary that is. Every single week, millions of people unknowingly continue repeating the memory of an ancient thunder god called Thor on every Thursday. And if we step back
Rome
once again, the same legendary structure emerges across the Eurasian world. In Rigvedic tradition, Indra fights Vritra. In Greece, Zeus battles Typhon. In Germanic world, Thor battles Jormungandr. Different names, different lands, different languages. The same structure again and again. But this is where India becomes fundamentally different from much of the rest of the ancient Indo-European world. In most parts of Europe, the older native traditions were completely erased thanks to Christianization. Zeus survives largely inside your comic books. Thor survives in your DC Marvel stuff. Jupiter survives in the historical memory, but in India, the older civilizational continuity never completely broke. The forms changed, the tradition evolved, but the legendary structure continued. If you are performing a Rudrabhishekam to a Shivalinga, you will be worshipping Indra at one point. If you are performing a Satyanarayana Vratam at your home, you will be worshipping Indra at one point. So it's a very much alive tradition. Hence, India is called as a civilizational state. Even today, echoes of these older Vedic traditions still survive under the Indian ritual traditions. As you can see here, ancient statues of Indra survived in temple art and sculpture, standing beside Airavata and holding the Vajra, the legendary sacrifice associated with Maharshi Dadichi, who gives up his own body so that the Vajra can be forged for Indra to defeat Vritra. Still survives symbolically in the Paramveer Chakra, India's highest wartime military honor. Think about that carefully. A legendary structure preserved from the Rigvedic world still survives in the symbolism of the modern India itself. And perhaps the most fascinating continuation of this legendary structure appears later once again in the story of Krishna and Kaliya. Once again, the exact symbolic pattern reemerges. A divine warrior Krishna, a monstrous serpent Kaliya, and the water being controlled and poisoned by Kaliya. Kaliya occupies the waters and terrorizes the people, then Krishna arrives, subdues the serpent and restores balance once again. The same legendary structure continues, but now retold through a different bhakti framework. And perhaps this tells us something very important. These stories may not be merely about the random legends. Beneath the gods and serpents may lie an ancient memories of drought, rivers, storms, monsoons, and humanity's desperate dependence on water itself. We don't know, but for sure, there is a shared cultural heritage between.
Yeah, that's something I like. Is like I truly believe, like, most of the stories that have been told throughout time that have now been written down, we have to look through it and actually look at the historical context related to it. Like, I truly believe, like, most of the stuff that's written down in the Vedas took place. I also do believe that they have been embellished a bit, which is kind of sad because history gets lost through embellishment. But did most of those things happen? Absolutely. Absolutely. Just like how the city of Troy truly existed. Was it the gods playing tricks, trying to win a bet by causing a war, having the most beautiful woman fall in love with the second prince of Troy? No, I don't believe that's even what happened. The gods weren't playing with mortals as they always do in the classic mythologies. That's ridiculous. But at the same time, I do believe that a lot of the stuff took place. Maybe there was something like that, but it's just like, oh my gosh. It's so fascinating. It's so fascinating just looking at it and being like, huh. Because the fact, just like the bridge, when they were about to fight Ravan, the bridge that was built by like the monkeys, they wrote a word on it and then it started to float. The fact that there is still remnants of that remaining to this day is just so fascinating. It's so freaking fascinating. I love those little elements, the nuances. Is like, yes, this stuff. There's clear indicators that things have happened, that battles were fought. But the truth from fiction, how do you separate it? What is real? What is not? How much do you believe? How little do you believe? How far down the rabbit hole do you go? Where's the line? Because it's just like there's so many similarities throughout everything. Just like I just find it fascinating. I absolutely find it fascinating. That because again, just like he was saying, is this the battle with nature? Is this their struggle? Is this how they interpreted their battle with nature? Going through a massive drought, having to fight for water, having to fight. Maybe it wasn't a battle, or maybe it wasn't some massive device. Maybe someone was trying to make a jimmy rig a shovel. Because, when there's a dried up river, you go to the deepest part of the river that maybe has some shade. If you dig, you can probably still find some water in there. But yeah, I still find this stuff very fascinating, very fascinating.
India and Europe beyond just the language. The serpent may symbolize obstruction, drought, the drying of rivers, and Indra, the wielder of thunder and rain, becomes the force that restores life back to the land. A legendary expression of nature itself transformed into ritual poetry. And over thousands of years, this same structure, the storm god, the serpent, and the release of the waters back to the people again, echoed again and again across the ancient Eurasian world, from the hymns of Rig Veda to the legends of Europe. Because no matter which part of the world you live in, humanity is deeply, deeply dependent on water, and maybe just this one aspect motivated people to adopt and form their own local variations of the same story again and again. Because one of the most powerful way to propagate knowledge since ancient times is through storytelling. We are not in here to probe for its facts or truth. What we wanted to understand and appreciate is the great legend of Indra and Vrutra over thousands of years. This same structure, the storm god, serpent, and release of waters back to people, reflects the survival story of the humanity itself, from India to the northernmost flanks of Europe as well. If you're interested in my content, do check my Telugu channel Project Govinda, where I'll be posting the same.
Yeah, the man versus nature type situation. The fact that you're having to fight for your life, and you have I enjoyed that. I really do like how there's similarities between it all. That's why I found the Hero of a Thousand Faces, that novel. I'm surprised I don't have a copy of it. I think I had a paper book and I wore it through because George Lucas got inspiration for that to write Star Wars, so I utilized it to write my books. And then I think I wore it out. I need to get a hard copy of it. I enjoy having hard copies of books rather than paperbacks. My wife prefers paperbacks. I don't know why, but she loves a paperback. I think because it's easier to open. For me, it's hardback because I just like the sound of breaking that spine. You open the book and you hear the crack. I love that sound. A first book open. But I do find it fascinating. I absolutely find it fascinating. And I truly believe stuff happened. A lot of the stories you hear, they happened. But how do you take the reality from the fiction? Because even now, and I've seen it in my family where I had a brother who something would happen and then he'd embellish it just to make it seem more better than it was. You
guys got a video? It's so bad.
And don't forget to like and subscribe.
Wait, wait, Sandra.